We'll get started. If you can put, which I haven't done, I haven't put my phones on silent anyway. Ears open. Right, membership of the committee. I believe with Mark Thompson missing, and Eric, you're here for...
Councillor Sokal is not very well today, that's hence my substitution.
Right, thanks Eric. Right, minutes of the previous meeting, can we agree those as a true record? Go. Any declarations, interests and lobbying? I'll start with Councillor Firth.
None, Chair.
Councillor Crook.
None, Chair.
Councillor Patterson.
None, Chair.
Councillor Pinnock.
None, Chair.
Councillor Armour.
None, Sir.
And none myself. Item 4, admission of the public. This is done on our own TV channel here at Kirklees. Item 5, any public questions?
No questions, Chair.
Any deputations or petitions?
No deputations or petitions, Chair.
Item 7, David, I believe you have a bit to say.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So at the last committee, we had a question from Councillor Armour regarding agenda item 7, which is the planning policy summary. And the question was whether the Environment Act meant that that summary needed to be updated. And as the Environment Act is an act of law which is implicit in the consideration of any relevant planning application, it doesn't necessarily mean that this needs to be updated because it's a summary. I hope that explains it.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, thanks David. Right, item 8. Site visit took place this morning at Home Avenue, Dalton, followed by another site visit off Fullwood Drive in Golka. So we'll move on to the applications now. It's page 7. This is Thurston Road at Honley and Fazana.
Thank you, Chair. I am Fazana Tabassum, the Planning Case Officer for this application. I was also the Case Officer for the relevant historical applications as listed in the committee report. The application is brought to Strategic Planning Committee following the deferral by Huddersfield Subcommittee on 19th of October and the recent changes to the Scheme of Delegation Agreement. Just to give members a quick overview of the site, a scheme for 17 dwellings was granted in February 2018. This included a soft landscaping scheme for the site, and at the time, following a review of the accompanied viability appraisal, no planning obligations were to be sought other than the maintenance and management of a diverter culvert which runs through the site. This is the permission that was implemented. A prow runs parallel to the western embankment, as shown on this plan here. It runs parallel with the western boundary, and which also is an embankment into the site. The embankment forms part of the garden areas to each of the properties that backs onto it. Technical details for a reinforced embankment along this boundary was approved under Condition 11 of this permission by the structures team in June 2018. The approved details were posted on the Kirklees website in accordance with normal procedure. The current proposals are now seeking to vary the previously approved landscaping scheme for the embankment along the western boundary to leave it as it is, a self-seeded, naturally vegetated embankment. A site visit was carried out by members of the Huddersfield Subcommittee on 19th of October before the application was heard and deferred on 2 grounds. These being to investigate the potential for additional planting to enhance biodiversity net gain at the Brockles Recreation Ground and to provide further information in respect of the enforcement history at the site, including why action was not pursued if it wasn't, in respect of breaches of conditions on previous permissions. Consideration was given for additional planting to increase biodiversity net gain at Brockles Recreation Ground. Both the Council's Woodland Development Manager and the Principal Landscape Architect Officer has confirmed this is not owned by the Council and therefore discounted. They have, however, confirmed there is scope for additional planting at the rear of the site of Meltham Road Recreation Grounds and/or opportunity to carry out works to improve ecological value at the Honley Head Wood on Bradshaw Road. Both these sites are in the same ward as the application site. With regards to enforcement history of the site, this is set out in full under Section 4, Paragraph 4.2 of the committee report. One further representation was received from Councillor Charles Greaves. This, along with officers' responses to the queries raised by Councillor Greaves, is set out under Paragraph 7.5 of the report. To conclude, taking a balanced approach of all material considerations, the recommendation before members is as set out in the committee update to delegate approval of the application and the issuing of the decision notice to the Head of Planning and Development to allow the applicant to submit a deed of variation to the original Section 106, which should include an additional obligation for the off-site contributions to secure the recognised shortfall of biodiversity net gain and complete the conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Right, we've got one speaker, and it's Councillor Greaves, who's got 5 minutes, starting from now.
Have you got me okay? Yeah, lovely. Good afternoon. I appreciate that this committee is new to this application, but I just want to give a quick overview of what my concerns are. Like residents, I'm keen to see a resolution, and I'm disappointed that I think that the developer's not going to be held to account for their repeated failures in this matter. The stability of the banking isn't particularly an issue currently, but that signing off for the banking was based upon the then submitted landscaping plan. That's never happened. The concern is if it's allowed to self-seed, if inappropriate things get established, that will compromise the matting, could compromise the stability of it. So one of the things I'm keen to do is for the developer to take responsibility for their failure to meet the conditions and to make it absolutely crystal clear to residents what will work, what won't work, how they need to manage that banking collectively to ensure that their insurance indemnity is sustained. There's a real danger now that because the houses have been sold, there's no effective way to take the developer to task. It's a pity that things went sideways. Effectively, if they'd have been tackled on this issue before they'd sold the last properties, then maybe there'd have been some room to manoeuvre. But the properties are long sold now, and as officers stated at the last meeting, we'd have to enforce against the residents, the very people actually who are, if you like, the victims of this failure. This application had a viability report submitted to it because of all the abnormal costs. One of those abnormal costs was about the cost of the banking. They've not actually complied with all the conditions that would have generated all those abnormal costs. They've not said how much it saved. They've not said how much it would cost to actually comply. What is clear is they've made a heck of a lot more money than that viability report ever suggested. So I'm a bit heated about this because I don't think it's acceptable for a developer to decide what conditions they're going to comply with. I don't think it's up for them to just to do nothing until forced. They've got the conditions for the planning. If they want to vary them, then they need to apply in a timely manner to do so, and they've failed to do so. I appreciate that ship has sailed, but I really do hope that planning and planning enforcement do think about how much time they give developers to comply, and that being too soft with them, being too gentle, actually just invites them to, shall we say, misuse the processes. I am aware that the developers had some conversations with residents. The veracity of what they're claiming is questionable, and I think the situation they've presented to residents is very much unclear. I think residents are of a mind that whatever the decision is now, that means everything's fine and good and sorted and there's nothing more to do, and there isn't. That's not true. What comes after this is proper maintenance of that banking for the next 100 years. And residents don't understand what that is. This council, the officers rather at the last meeting made it clear that it wasn't a responsibility of the council to do that. Isn't it not a responsibility of the developer to make sure that they finish their job off properly and explain to the residents who've spent a lot of money on those houses what they need to do to make sure that they comply with the planning conditions and that they comply with the insurance for that banking and that the banking remains safe? Because I think the developer suggesting that because this was a brownfield site, they've done us a favour, and because of that, anything should pass. That does not work for me. In respect of the biodiversity net gain, it's nice to have had something. I would have liked to reopen the Section 106 agreement and actually used the real figures. I'd flagged it up to officers beforehand that the estate agent, when advertising the properties, advertised them at bigger than what the viability statement has said for square footage, and that the sales prices were considerably higher as well, whilst at the same time the abnormals had come down. But apparently we're not able to review the Section 106 agreement, although we are able to add something to it. The comment regarding Brockholes Rec, I don't really understand that. Brockholes Rec is a council rec. Kirklees is currently undertaking a substantial programme of work in the rec, but I'm fine if it goes into Meltham Road rec. I'd just like to see this money land somewhere locally. I have put forward some suggestions about trying to bring the developer to task to take responsibility for it. I think it's the developer that should be communicating to the residents so that residents know exactly where the blame lies. Because at the moment, the developers are trying to make out that the blame lies with this council, and that is not true.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to clarify one point that Councillor Greaves just made at the beginning. The Council Structures team have confirmed that the approved technical AIP, the approval in principle, was not dependent on the approved landscaping scheme. I think what Councillor Greaves says was opposite there, so I just want to clarify on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask what seems like a very simple question? Have the developers, in the case of this application, complied with all the conditions?
Through you, Chair. The enforcement history is noted in the committee report, and any breach of condition that was raised to officers was considered, action was taken or looked into, and all breaches were, well, most of them were closed with no further action. So there's not been any further breaches of condition brought to the attention of officers.
Sorry, Chair, you've used the word most. Does that imply that there are some conditions that they have not yet complied with?
No, what I'm saying is most of the conditions that officers were informed of that were in breach, those listed in the committee report, have been looked into and considered. There's one outstanding, the air conditioning units. So with regards to the conditions on the original planning application, the 2016 permission, there's not been any further information brought to officers' attention that they're in breach of any of the conditions.
Councillor, can I just clarify? Therefore, there's no other breaches other than the one already mentioned regarding landscaping. Thank you.
I was going to say that nobody else seems very keen to. So if we were to refuse permission to do this, what would be the consequences?
Well, as you can see from the report, this is a pragmatic proposed solution to a breach of condition notice, and it's, in the officer's view, a way of achieving the intention of the soft landscaping scheme, which was to bring about the benefits of residential amenity and biodiversity gain. The boat has sailed, basically, in terms of getting that landscaping scheme on the site, and therefore the proposal here is to deal with the lack of benefit or the omitted benefit in terms of biodiversity by having an off-site contribution. If it were not approved, we wouldn't get the benefit of the off-site biodiversity contribution.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's one of these where I don't like it, to be absolutely frank. It does look as if, and I could be wrong, but it does look as if the developer is trying it on, to use the vernacular. That being said, we really are a bit stuck. Much of the land now is in private ownership, is my understanding of the papers. Well, certainly I wouldn't wish to take action against householders who bought the land innocently, so to speak. I don't like it, but I honestly don't think there's a great deal we can do other than accept the change of conditions. So that being the case, I'll propose that we accept change of conditions.
Thanks, Chair. So can I just clarify? So the structural stability of the banking is not a question at all. The works to stabilise the banking were done, and we're just talking about some planting on top. So I think Councillor Greaves had mentioned some concern about the stability of the bank being undermined by self-seeded plants. But as I understand it, in the original condition, the maintenance of the planting was only for 5 years, and the guarantee of stability is 120 years. So we could assume in the other 115 years that any number of plants would exist there. So the stability is clearly not related to the surface planting. I think it's a shame that we can't look at the viability review and see what the profit outcome was, because it's something that concerns us as a broader planning sense, but that being what it is. So can I just clarify, we're asking for £23,920 from the developer, and that's not to mitigate the loss of landscaping that the people who bought the houses are lacking, and that would be a private matter between them and the person they bought, the developer they bought the houses from. We're just talking about the biodiversity. So on that basis, you know, I think it's better to have the biodiversity somewhere in the locality rather than not have it. And the separate issue that we're perhaps more concerned about is an issue now that's privately between the house owners and the developer. So I'm happy to second it on that basis.
So you're voting on the officer recommendation, including the addition from the update. Councillor Firth.
4.
Councillor Crook.
4.
Councillor Pattison.
4.
Councillor Pinnock.
4.
Councillor Armour.
4.
Councillor Hall.
4.
That's carried, Chair, unanimous.
Gil.
Should never have happened.
Next item, page 31. This is Ellie, looking at Fullwood Drive, Golka.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Ellie Thornhill, case officer for this application. The application relates to land off Fullwood Drive in Golka and is for full planning permission for the erection of 12 dwellings and associated works. The application has been brought to committee due to the number of representations received in opposition to the development. Here is the location plan. The site is off the turning head on Fullwood Drive. It's 0.14 hectares in size and slopes downhill from north to south, as you can see on the existing topographical plan, which is here. The site is allocated for housing within the Kirklees local plan and also falls within Golka Conservation Area. A number of listed buildings also surround the site to the north and the south, so they sit along here and down there. Here are some photos from Forward Drive where access would be taken from. So this photo is taken from Forward Drive, and then this is taken from the turning head on Forward Drive. Its outline permission with access approved was granted in March 2018. Here are some photos from within the site. As seen today, there is a significant change in topography within the site and the surrounding area. No buildings exist within the site's boundaries, and it is currently a greenfield site, part of it of which has overgrown self-seeded trees and shrubs. No trees within the site are subject to preservation orders. Here are some photos taken from the public footpath which runs to the west of the site. So that's the public footpath, and this is the site in consideration. The public footpath also separates this site from the previously approved housing site to the east, known as Clay Wells. Here is a longer distance photo taken from Copley Bank Road. You can see the site's hillside location, so the site is here, and this is just a good example of the site that started to be built out to the east, and then this middle site has also started to be built out. Here is the proposed site plan. As previously mentioned, access would be taken from Forward Drive. Internally, a new estate road would be provided with a turning head and a private drive to the west. So that's down here. A pedestrian connection is proposed onto the prow, so the footway will run along this side and then the prow connections there. The dwellings would be arranged along the new estate road in the formation of 8 semi-detached, 3 terrace properties and 1 detached dwelling. The mix would include 1 one-bed, 1 two-bed and 10 three-beds, shown within 6 different house types. With regards to the principle of development, as mentioned, the house is allocated for housing within the Kirklees local plan and has received previous permissions for this use. The density and housing mix is considered to be reasonable for the site, taking into account the changes in topography and existing built form. In terms of visual amenity, the site is located within a highly sensitive location, given its hillside, highly sensitive location, given that it's within Golca's hillside and conservation area. Therefore, significant amendments have been sought throughout the course of this long-standing planning application. In this instance, the dwellings would appear 2-storey in height from the highway, with the rear elevations of plots 1 to 7 being 3-storey. This is similar to the properties to the site immediately to the east. The use of differing front and rear elevations is considered to be an appropriate response to the site's challenges. Sorry, I've just lost where I was then. With regards to the dwelling's architectural form, they would have a typical simple vernacular, some of which would benefit from front and rear gables and lean-to additions in order to add some variation. Here are some examples of the house type proposed. So on screen are house types A and B, and these would be situated to the north side of the site. These would be the true 2-storey dwellings, and blind windows are proposed to house type A, which is this one, in order just to add some variation and some detail into the stonework. For plots house type A, which is plots 11 and 12, would be the affordable homes and would provide 1 two-bed and 1 one-bed house. House type B, which are these ones, would be 3-bed dwellings. Here are the house types C and E, both of which would benefit from a 3rd storey to the rear elevation. Materials for all dwellings would be natural stone with concrete tiles to the roofs. The scheme has been assessed by heritage officers in relation to the impact it would have on the conservation area and nearby listed buildings. The officer has confirmed that they are in support of the application as the dwellings would have an acceptable design along with the installation of natural boundary treatment. As such, there would be no undue harm to the aforementioned heritage assets. In terms of residential amenity, adequate separation distances would be achieved to all third-party properties, with the nearest dwelling being number 20 Forward Drive. A full assessment upon neighbours' amenity along with other properties A full assessment upon these neighbours' amenity along with other properties at Forward Drive, Claywells and Brook Lane can be found within paragraphs 10.55 to 10.59 of the committee report. An acceptable level of amenity is also proposed for the future occupiers of the dwellings, as each unit would either meet or exceed the nationally described space standards. With regards to outdoor amenity space, adequately sized gardens are also proposed. The landscape plans to the right-hand side of the screen also show a planted area within the entrance to the site, so that's here. With regards to highway safety, KC Highway DM have reviewed the proposals and consider this application to be an extension from Forward Drive and is acceptable. It's important to note that in a representation, it was requested that could the site be connected via the existing development at Claywells. However, this cannot be achieved due to changes in topography. However, nonetheless, outline permission has been granted with access from Forward Drive previously. The road width has been designed to an adoptable size with a turning head to the northwest. Adequate on-street, off-street parking is proposed in line with the Highways Design Guide SPDs, and plot 2 to 7 would have integral garages. Visitor parking is also shown at the end of the turning head, which is here, and there's also going to be a lay-by there. This is welcomed by officers. A sweat path analysis has also been provided for a refuse truck, so we are satisfied that it can enter back onto the highway Forward Drive in forward gear, and adequate space has been made for waste storage and collection. As such, Highways Structures, Highways DM and Waste colleagues are in support of the development. In terms of drainage, attenuation tanks are proposed under the private drives, so they will sit here, and a connection would be made to the Claywell site. As such, officers are satisfied that there is adequate space within the site for water, with further technical drainage details to be conditioned. KC Ecology have confirmed that the habitats on the site are no more than site value. However, adequately worded conditions are proposed to ensure that these are protected during construction and are enhanced as part of this development. An off-site contribution to achieve a 10% net gain will be touched on shortly. As previously mentioned, the site includes a number of trees, some of which will need to be removed in order to facilitate this development. Whilst this is not ideal, it's important to note that the site is allocated for housing, and therefore, in order to achieve an acceptable design that is policy compliant, some of the trees within the site will need to be removed. Nonetheless, these would be replaced and will be conditioned as part of an adequately worded landscape condition. As part of that condition, officers would seek to know the tree size, species and location and its appropriate aftercare and maintenance. Additional conditions would also be required in the case of an approval with regards to land contamination, a construction environmental management plan and security and crime prevention measures as some examples, and have been highlighted within the committee report. The application has received 32 representations by 22 different individuals / local residents due to the number of rounds of publicity undertaken. Officers have provided a response to those concerns throughout the committee report and particularly within paragraph 10.108. Lastly, in terms of financial contributions, a full package has been secured to include 2 affordable homes, one of which would be affordable rent and 1 first home, an education contribution, an off-site public open space and biodiversity net gain contribution, and also a section 106 in the case of an approval would capture the management and maintenance of land outside of domestic curtilage and for the drainage infrastructure. For these reasons, given that the site is allocated for housing, has been designed in a sensitive manner to reflect local character, protect residential amenity and then to ensure highway safety and all other material planning considerations, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
We've got one speaker, that's Hamish Gledhill.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. I think the planning officer's covered most points very well in a summary there, but just briefly, this is, as mentioned, a housing allocation that obtained planning permission, outline planning permission from an application that was submitted back in 2014. The topography of the area means that this is a challenging site, which explains why it's taken nearly 10 years to get to this point where hopefully after today, the site can be developed. This application alone has taken 2 years to get to the point where we have a recommendation for approval. Hopefully on your site visit this morning, you will have seen the constrained nature of this site and you'll understand the difficulties this site brings to a developer. The slope across the site and the desire to retain mature trees where possible means the only access into the site can be from Fulwood Drive to the west. The proposed estate road being at the maximum acceptable gradient sloping from the northwest down to the southeast, and it's simply not possible to run the road any further into the site to the south. The 7 units on the southern side of the access road have access and garages at mid-floor level. The floor-to-ceiling heights have been squeezed as much as possible whilst maintaining a quality design. The outcome is that the ridge height of these properties is as low as feasibly possible for these 3-bedroom houses. During the application process, we have responded to concerns raised by English Heritage, who are now satisfied that the proposed development reflects the character of the Golka Conservation Area. We acknowledge that the scheme requires the removal of some of the trees on site, including those already removed, which were removed to enable the site to be accurately surveyed and to find the drainage culverts on the site. However, we have agreed to a condition which will require a detailed planting scheme that will include native species with a mixture of new and semi-mature trees. This will also use the tree survey that was undertaken before the removal of any trees, which will be used as the baseline. We believe the scheme provides an efficient use of the site, providing a mix of house types, as well as the provision of 2 affordable houses. As the planning officer mentioned, there are other contributions including education, public open space, sustainable transport, and an off-site contribution for biodiversity net gain. The proposed development is supported by all other council statutory consultees. We hope you will support the officer's recommendation and approve this planning application. Thank you, Chair.
Members, it's over to you. Eric.
I'm just looking at a small line in the report, and it asks about insulation, which is very important, energy conservation, as we all know today. Have you any details as planning officers what the developers intend? Because there are standards, aren't there? Is it 1 to 5, 1 to 6, about insulation in new homes?
Through you, Chair, I believe that would be covered at the building regulation stage. In order to build the houses, they would have to comply with the current legislation. So we don't know that detail at the moment. However, above and beyond that, I have asked for a condition 31, and it's just to also know in terms, well, we need details of other forms of renewable energy and energy efficient measures. So that will be covered under that condition also, but we don't know any specific technical details at this time, I'm afraid.
Okay, but I just want to emphasise to you, Chair, that more and more important is the insulation and energy saving in new build.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have 1 or 2 queries about this. We've already heard that trees on the site are going to be replaced. Is that on site or is it somewhere else? And if somewhere else, where, please? And also, where is the biodiversity net gain going to take place if not on site? And then I have some queries about drainage, which I raised when we were on the site visit. It says in the report that this area is subject to springs on that hillside, and of course the nature of springs is that you don't necessarily know where they're going to come out. And in fact, on one of the photographs, I noticed there was a patch of water on the road which looked as though it had come from that source. Conditions 11, 13 and 15 all talk about drainage in one form or another. What I think is important here is to avoid water from springs or indeed other sources getting across the pavement, if at all possible, by diverting it either by permeable surfaces or by drains at the bottom of the housing site, not so that you don't get water running across the pavement, and that's not a very good idea in my opinion. So I'd just like clarification on those points. I think looking at the plans, we've got what seems to me to be a good plan to use the site, which is in a challenging location. I can see that. It's challenging enough getting up the access road. So yes, but I'd like some reassurance on those points, please.
Through you, Chair, yes, thank you for those comments. So in terms of the trees, Councillor, they will be replaced on site. So we have suggested a condition for full landscape details within the committee report. So that will include any new trees, including the size, species, and also the long-term maintenance and management. Just one thing to note in terms of the trees that are on site, they are of kind of unsuitable for retention or low value, and therefore they do need to be removed to achieve an adequate layout, etc. So a betterment could be sought by that landscape in condition. So yeah, the trees will be provided on site. In terms of the biodiversity net gain, we don't have a specific place where it's going to be. We don't normally have specifics, but it is to be used in the local area. And then lastly, just in terms of the springs, yes, we will be attaching suitably worded conditions to the decision notice to include full surface water information, and also, as mentioned, in terms of the permeable surfacing for the private drives, to ensure that water doesn't enter the highway, that it can be stopped before it does so. So yes, the conditions are set out within the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I basically wanted to make the same point that Eric had made before. I noticed that the original planning, outline planning, was from 2014, so I guess just to double check that the insulation and thermal performance standards that we'd be looking for would be at least the current ones in 2023. But I noticed in 10.21 there's a request for details of renewables and energy efficiency requirements mentioned without putting any quantification on what we would like to see. And also in response to one of the comments from residents on page 75, it just says that we will be ensuring there's insulation in line with current building regulations. So I just wanted to make a background point that really, as I would like to see us asking for that to be exceeded, particularly in line with 10.21, where you're looking at renewable energy adoption, because things like heat pumps require a higher level of insulation, so we ought to be looking at that a little bit more quantitatively at this point. And just one other quick question, if that's all right. Under the recommendations, 2 affordable housing units, 1 affordable or social rent. And I think there's a clarification to be made there, because affordable rent and social rent are not the same thing. So I'd like to understand which one we're aiming for in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On the sustainability point, I think, you know, as Ellie said there, we do have a condition, but we are guided by obviously what is required by building regs, and we don't really want to set a precedent in going above what is required by building regulations. So that is really where it is, Councillor. Building regs will pick that up, but we do have the details coming to us in terms of renewables, in terms of the details, but it won't be above the building regs standards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to come back on that, just to clarify. I would like to see us set a precedent of exceeding building regulations as a thermal performance standard. That's basically the point I'm making. So we in this country lag behind quite significantly, and it's a shame, I think. I understand the difficulties in that, but I just wanted to clarify. I'm not arguing. I'm just saying I would like to see that precedent set personally. Thank you.
And on that, may I? And just follow up, Chair, on that very point. We would welcome if developers stepped up and said, yes, we are quite willing to exceed the building standards that are written in law, but there's nothing to stop developers coming forward and say we will increase the level of insulation. I don't want to start a conversation with the applicants today, but do you think that would be welcome?
Thank you, Chair. Similar point to re the water, etc., that Councillor Pinnock was talking about. Whilst we were on site, we saw the previously built houses on Forward Drive who had ridiculously short and steep driveways. I mean, either going down from the house or worse, going into the houses on the road below. And forgetting springs, I mean, anywhere that, on a hillside, you get an awful lot of runoff water, and that will, is in danger of going across any drain and straight into the houses on the lower side, if nothing else. What we talked about on the bus, and I would like to see, and I'm not quite sure where it is in the conditions, if it is flat drives rather than drives at any particular angle, or as flat as possible.
Sorry, yeah, through you. I was just looking for the condition. Yeah, I think as I described, Councillor, on the bus, we looked at it as a bad example of what had been already built on Fulwood Drive and the steepness of those driveways. When we did some calculations with the levels, we felt that there could be, some of the driveways could be too steep. We raised this with the agent. They have assured us that they aren't too steep and that they will be no steeper than 1 in 12. But we have asked for an additional condition. I think it's on, just can't say either which number it is, but there is a condition asking them to clarify the garage floor level with the carriageway floor level and make sure that the gradients, there will not be flat on there, but that there will be an acceptable level, better than the ones that we've got on Fulwood Drive.
Yeah, I'll just come back on that with an anecdote, if I may. I mean, I lived in a house in Waldale in Hongfirth once upon a time, in a very similar situation. And the house across from ours was higher. The car was parked on the drive. They failed to put the brake on adequately, and it rolled right back down their driveway, across the road, and down into our driveway and into our house. So I trust that that situation can also be avoided by the lack of steepness or a more level.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, through you. I mean, there will not be level, but there's the topography of that site. It is a difficult site to develop, but the gradients will be to an acceptable gradient.
I'm being rather flippant here, Chair. We can't condition that all the people on Forward Drive and beyond have the brakes checked on a regular basis.
If I may, just on the affordable housing point, so in the recommendation we have that 2 affordable units will be provided, 1 affordable or social rent and 1 first home. At this moment in time, we can't advise which one of those it is, but that would be depend on what the council's strategic housing department would recommend in discussions with the applicant.
Eric.
Can I move the recommendation, Chair?
You can. Joe.
Yes, just a clarification. Would those discussions that you've just talked about, would that be before the decision notice has been issued or afterwards?
Yeah, that'll be before we've issued the decision notice. Oh, sorry, post decision notice.
We'll just secure that mix of 1 first home, which is purchased, and 1 rented property. The actual specific tenure will be negotiated afterwards. The point here is that we secure 2 affordables, and it depends on what is required with the SHMA and what strategic housing want or recommend.
Does that satisfy Councillor Crook's query?
Right, it has been moved, it has been seconded, so we'll go to a vote.
So you're voting on the officer recommendation as set out in the papers. Councillor Firth.
For.
Councillor Crook.
For.
Councillor Pattison.
For.
Councillor Pinnock.
For.
Councillor Armour.
For.
Councillor Hall. For. That's carried, Chair, unanimous.
Right, next page 81, and this is Home Avenue at Dalton, and it's Nick.
Thank you, Chair. Good day, members. My name is Nick Hurst, Case Officer for this application. It is a Section 73 variation of condition seeking to vary Condition 1 of Application 2019-93068, which was a reserved matters considering layout, scale, appearance and landscaping to Outline Permission 2018-91119. Together, these applications approve the erection of 22 dwellings at the site. The condition in question sought to be varied is the plans table, with a proposal seeking to change the site layout and house types. Furthermore, the proposal seeks to modify the previously approved Section 106 obligation, which will be elaborated upon shortly. Before you is the previously approved layout on the left-hand side and the proposed on the right. The point of access and the number of units would be unaffected. Officers are satisfied that the layout changes are minimal and would not prejudice the visual amenity, residential amenity, or other material considerations. Due to the layout and level changes of the proposal, further details relating to the steepness of the highways were sought and were provided and then found to be acceptable. Chris Dowes from the Highways Group is available should there be further questions on this. These images indicate the house type changes, specifically those along the southern boundary, with the previously approved on top and the proposed below. The proposed amended units would not include a garage, but beyond that would be comparable in appearance to those previously approved. As the number of bedrooms per unit would be reduced, the loss of the garages do not raise concerns over parking provision. The proposed units would be marginally smaller in footprint and lower in height than those previously approved. This image shows the previously approved and proposed elevations of units along the north boundary. Of note, these include the removal of a storey to lower the dwellings further. As has been seen on the site visit today, the site is steeply sloped. This image shows an example of the previously proposed site section and how the levels would be affected. And this is the same section for the new proposal. So I'll just... And another example, this again being the previously approved and that proposed. The application seeks to amend the previously approved 106 agreement. Following a viability assessment, the previous Section 106 agreement secured 2 dwellings, 10% of the total, as starter homes, and no public open space or sustainable travel contributions which were expected. The applicant is a new landowner and is also a registered provider of social housing. Therefore, providing 2 starter homes would not comply with their business model, and they seek to update the 106 to deliver 4 affordable units. There would be no change to the public open space or sustainable travel contributions, or lack thereof. Thus, while the proposal would continue not to deliver a POS or sustainable travel contribution, the increase in affordable housing units is a clear betterment over the previous arrangement and is welcomed by officers. The report before members fully details officers' assessment of the proposal. In summary, the proposed variations in design are acceptable and would not prejudice the development's quality, nor harm relevant planning materials considerations. 7 public representations have been received. These have been considered and addressed within the committee report. Officers therefore recommend approval of the application, subject to securing the updated 106 agreement and conditions as set out within the recommendation. Nothing further to add, Chair.
Thanks, Nick. Right, we've got one speaker. Muz.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make it clear I'm here today as a resident and not a councillor or a member of Huddersfield subcommittee. So all that aside, just purely a resident. So generally, I'm in support of this application overall. However, I want to draw the committee's attention to my concern as a resident in an adjacent property. Is there any chance we could pull up the slide proposal D, please? Yeah, this one. Yeah, thank you. I'm concerned with the stability of my property given the changes in the excavation proposed to the rear of the site. So my house is at the top. I fear my property is being put at risk of subsidence and the stability of my property being compromised by these proposed changes from the original application. If you look at the brown line, that's the existing ground level. So the lowering of this existing ground level on the incline involves a lot more of the banking being removed in this application than in the previous one. And there's a reduced height, going by the diagram, of the retaining wall in this application as in comparison to the original proposal. So these changes, therefore, are materially different from the first application, and I'm concerned as to whether the retaining works, given the proposal to lower the surface level so much, are adequate and won't impact on my property at the top, which ends just as the incline starts. So that's, that's all my back garden. So please could I request that further investigations are impact assessments are carried out and approval is conditioned to the satisfactory outcome of them. And for any information or detailed investigations to be made available for assurance to residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So as a Section 73 application, we need to remember that the starting point is what has been previously approved. At Section 73, we can only look at the matter. So what are the impacts of these changes? So we'll just flick back to what was previously approved. So yeah, as has been pointed out by the resident, there is a difference there, but fundamentally planning permission has been granted for engineering operations to that banking. But there are changes and stability was not raised previously. We must consider public representations. Therefore, officers consider the most reasonable approach to impose a condition, as is detailed in the report number 12, for those stability works to be, for the stability to be reviewed and mitigation undertaken. It is felt to be unreasonable to insist on it prior to determination. We don't think it's needed to make the decision, but it will be there required before those works commence. Nothing further, Chair. Through you, Chair. As part of that, that will be reviewed by the Council Structures Department.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, as other members of the committee will attest, I raised this issue on site because I am concerned, not from the point of view of Councillor Khan, obviously, but simply because there is a huge bank between the two sets of houses, and I particularly given things that have been happening with our weather and runoff and so on, I want something to be conditioned that will show that this slope is not vulnerable to a one in however many years climate event that could happen, because in the end we as a planning authority are responsible for anything we give permission for, and would have to own up to it in the end if it wasn't done correctly. I mean, I agree with the planning officer that we don't need to do it before giving permission, but the fact that there is a condition there which actually wasn't there before, condition 12, to carry out the requisite surveys and remedial work if necessary, gives me confidence that this will be sorted. Is that condition pre-commencement, or doesn't it matter?
Through you, Chair. We are advised by the national government to avoid pre-commencements wherever possible. Ultimately, we would look to avoid those works commencing the excavations. If we could word it in a way, ultimately development has already commenced on the site. You saw the access has been done, so actually we probably couldn't impose a pre-commencement. So it will need to be worded prior to excavations associated with the rear southern boundary, something to that effect. But fundamentally, it will take place and be investigated before they start digging. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think you described how maybe to word this, it's complicated, isn't it, how to word it. But I think we can give Councillor Khan some assurance and her neighbours that her house won't finish up in the new development, you know, going forward. So given that assurance from our officers, I'd like to move.
I'll second that.
So again, you're voting on the officer recommendation as set out in the report to approve.
With the new condition.
The conditions already included in the list of conditions in the report.
It's a 4.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. Councillor Crook?
4.
Councillor Pattison?
4.
Councillor Pinnock?
4.
Councillor Armour?
4.
Councillor Hall?
4.
Again, that's clearly carried. Unanimous, Chair.
Right, I believe that's it.
I believe that's it, yes.
Have a good Christmas and a Happy New Year.
And the same to you, sir.